I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. In this week's episode, we are exploring a hot topic, and that is the Impossible Burger versus Beyond Burger. And a couple of years ago, I would have thought if we said we were going to be talking what's essentially veggie burgers, it would not be what we would call a hot topic. It's not something that would be hitting super mainstream. But thanks to these two guys, the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger, plant-based meats, plant-based burgers, and essentially vegan or veggie burgers, these have become hot topics. And I think Burger King has single-handedly made the Impossible Burger the huge talking point that it is. If you've caught the commercials, there's Burger King, it looks like they've got like the hidden camera and customers like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell it's not beef. I would think it is beef. And you're watching it and you're like, really? Like those are plants? There's no way, plants being the people are planted. There's no way that they think that this is real beef. It's fake. So the more and more we're seeing these and we keep hearing this feedback, I was like, okay, let's get into this. Let's see, can people really tell the difference? So we've done several things. We've got the side-by-side comparison for you of Impossible Burger versus Beyond Burger, and then also comparing that to just traditional beef. So we've got what's the nutritional comparison on those? And just because they're vegan, that doesn't necessarily make them better. They certainly aren't more natural, and we'll talk about that as well. But we also did a taste test. And so we had a blind taste test, 15 people, all different types of people. They weren't all specifically healthy eaters. So 15 people who had a blind taste test, and we had Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, and then an all beef burger. And we had them labeled ABC. So I'm going to share with you the results of that taste test and also just the feedback. It was crazy. So I thought that was super interesting. And then we'll talk, kind of what some of these ingredients are. What are they made from? There's some things on there that you probably haven't seen before, which always makes us a little bit uncomfortable. So what are some of these ingredients? And then finally, after we talk about the taste test results and are these burgers really healthier, where do we find them? So we'll be covering all of these things in the podcast. And I'm really going to keep the focus mostly on Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger. There are tons of other meatless burgers. There's the brand Morningstar Farms. It's been around forever. Boca has been around forever. Amy's, Gardein. So there's a lot of brands of veggie burgers that have been around for years. Many of them are soy-based. A lot of them are vegan. Some of them do have things like egg whites or other ingredients that make them not vegan, but still essentially meatless burgers. But what sets these two apart, the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger, is just how much like beef they really are. And that's what has people talking. So people who normally would have turned their nose up, there's no way they're going to have any of those other traditional veggie burgers, are actually kind of open to having something like the Beyond or Impossible Burger. So there's several reasons I would say these are gaining in popularity. One, the fact that we'll talk about how and why, but a lot of these really do more mimic the taste, texture, feel of real beef. There's a lot of people who simply choose to avoid animal products, whether they're following a vegan diet, vegetarian diet. And even if they're not doing vegan or vegetarian diets, a lot of us just want to have more plants. And so we're looking to limit animal products where we can and replacing it with plant-based products. And then there's the benefit on the environment. So when we look at the amount of grain that is required to feed cattle to make traditional beef, there's a lot of grain that's required, a grain that requires a lot of fertilizer, water, pesticides. And so there's a lot of reasons for the environment when we switch to plant-based beef that we're looking at benefits there. It's a lot lighter impact on the environment. So when we're first looking at the nutrition facts of these guys, the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, and we look at that as compared to all beef, they're actually pretty similar in a lot of areas. So when we're looking at, say, just a 4-ounce burger, the calories are almost all about the same. Now, for an 85% lean beef fat patty, and that's going to be leaner than what a lot of people do, not quite as lean as we like 93, 95% lean beef. And of course, when possible, if you can buy organic beef, and you can even now get organic beef at places like Walmart for organic lean ground beef. So we don't have to go to specialty stores for these things. But when we look at the calories of 4 ounces of, say, 85% lean beef, comparing that to the Impossible and the Beyond Burger, 240, 250 calories, not much difference. When we look at the total fat, 14 for the Impossible, 18 for the Beyond, about 17 for that beef. And then saturated fat, similar, 6, 7, 8, depending on which one it is. So pretty close in line there. The carbs are higher for the Impossible Burger, and we'll talk about why in a bit. And the fiber is also higher. The protein is similar, about 19 to 21 grams of protein across the board for all of those. Where there's a huge variation, giant, is in the sodium. And traditional, just regular beef, that 4-ounce patty has about 90 milligrams of sodium. The Impossible Burger, 370. The Beyond Burger, 390. So right off the bat, when we're comparing these across the board and we look at how does, from just the numbers, how do they line up, Impossible, Beyond, and then 85% lean beef. The calories are the same, total fats relatively similar, saturated fats relatively similar. The proteins relatively similar. The big difference is the sodium. Another thing I'll point out is the saturated fat, of course, in beef is animal-based saturated fat, obviously. The saturated fat that is in the Impossible and the Beyond Burger, they are using plant-based oils. So they're using things like coconut oil to give that fat in there. So while that is still considered a saturated fat, when it comes to our health, when it comes to how does it impact our cholesterol, our heart health, it's going to have a more neutral effect than what animal fats. Now, there's a lot of mixed science. There's a lot of conflicting science. But overall, we do think that when we compare the animal saturated fat to the coconut oil or plant-based saturated fat, that there is going to be a lesser impact with the plant-based saturated fat. So even though those numbers are the same or similar, the sources of that saturated fat is vastly different if we're looking at animal versus plant. But I would say as far as the numbers on the label, that sodium is the biggest one. So if you're watching your sodium intake, it's already 300 milligrams higher just when we switch to that patty. So that's kind of it by the numbers. Now, I will say, if you're using an extra lean ground beef, if you're using a 93, 95, of course, calories, total fat, saturated fat are going to be much lower, and protein would be a bit higher. But when it comes to burgers, a lot of people kind of want that juiciness. So that's why I went with 85 for that comparison. So that's kind of the, how do they measure up? Calories, total fat, saturated fat, pretty similar. Sodium is your biggest difference. Carbs, being aware that that Impossible Burger does have a bit more carb, 9 grams. The Beyond Burger has 3. And then beef, of course, has 0. So numbers aren't shockingly different here, but when we look at the ingredients and what's in it, so beef, of course, is just beef, 100% ground beef. The Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger, I'll kind of talk back and forth between the two. The biggest difference, I guess, first, let's look at the source of protein. And so Impossible Burger, that's the one that's in that Burger King commercial. The Impossible Burger uses a soy protein as the main protein source. Beyond Burger uses a pea protein. And so we'll talk taste and we'll talk our taste test results in a little bit. But knowing that that protein source is very different, soy is the source for the Impossible Burger. Pea protein is what's in the Beyond Burger. Now, when we look at the types of fats, they both use an oil. So Impossible Burger uses sunflower oil. Beyond Burger uses a canola oil. They both use coconut oil. So they've got those, the plant-based saturated fat of the coconut oil. Then they have their protein source. Okay, that's the base. When we start to look at the other ingredients in here, the Beyond Burger has things like cellulose from bamboo. That's fiber. So a burger from them has 2 grams of fiber. You're getting it from the cellulose from bamboo. It also has a bit of potato starch in it, which is part of why it gives us 3 grams of carbs. Things like yeast extract, so dried yeast, some gums in there to help keep it all to stick together, some modified food starch in there. For color, it just uses things like beet juice extract, and that kind of gives it that redder color. So that beet juice is what's being used for color. So pretty most, not things that are, of course, found in a normal burger. Nothing really wacky. I mean, some people might think I'm eating bamboo cellulose. That seems a bamboo fiber, but all in all, these seem okay. When we look at the Impossible Burger, we have, again, soy protein, the oils, including the coconut oil. And then there's a bit of potato protein in there, some modified food starch. Again, other vitamins and minerals. It does have vitamins and minerals fortified into that Impossible Burger, which for me isn't really a big deal because there's a lot of other ways we can get those in our diet. We don't need to get them from this, but that is a point to note. But one of the things that really sets apart the Impossible Burger is this key ingredient in here that is called soy leg hemoglobin. And that last part is all one word, leg hemoglobin. And so it's leg, like leg, and then the word hemoglobin, all one word. So this was something I wasn't familiar with when I saw it. I'm like, what is this in here? And so this soy leg hemoglobin, it is a red pigment. It's found in the roots of legume plants. So legumes like soybeans. So in the root system of things like soybeans, there's this red pigment that is the soy leg hemoglobin. And it is structurally similar to the hemoglobin in our body. It also has a red color like hemoglobin. And so apparently the Impossible Burger Company has seen that using this soy leg hemoglobin has not only given it the red color, it makes it almost look like it's bleeding, like a blood, like you would have in a burger. But it also gives it that red, just the red color in general, but also kind of looks like you would have like a really rare looking burger when you're looking at that rare meat. And so when we look at what is hemoglobin, hemoglobin, it is an iron containing protein in our blood. If you think back to science class, and it's involved in carrying and storing oxygen in our bodies. But it's one of the things that also gives meat its very unique flavor. So there's just something to that beefiness, that flavor that is really hard to replicate. And so if you have a steak or you have an all beef burger, there's just that something to it that you're not getting in most regular veggie burgers. And so what they brought to the table, Impossible Burger, is that they identified and said, okay, it's this, hemoglobin that gives a lot of that unique flavor. It gives obviously kind of that red color. And so using this soy leg hemoglobin was their answer to give it that meaty flavor, give it that look of blood in here. One of the issues with this is that because they would need a ton of soybeans to make enough of this soy leg hemoglobin to create these products, they created a modified strain of yeast with their genetic code for soy leg hemoglobin so they could make a lot more of it with only a fraction of the amount of soybeans. So basically, it's a genetically modified ingredient that they created in order to be able to mass produce the Impossible Burger. So for that reason, it took a while to get it on the market in retailers. And so it was waiting for FDA approval. It wasn't approved until just recently. It's actually, as I'm doing this podcast, we've seen that it's available in 3 retailers in the country, none that I've seen here in the South. And we'll get into retailers in a bit. But it took a really long time for them to get approval, get it into the retail space. So in the meantime, Impossible Burger Company said, okay, what can we do? So they did what they could to really help try to make it take off and get really popular in restaurants. And so that's a lot of the reason why we've started seeing the Impossible Burger on restaurant menus. And I mentioned earlier Burger King. I'll go through in a little bit some of the other restaurants that have it, but we're not seeing it in our store shelves, at least not yet. So, when you look at that and it's like, okay, well, neither of these are natural products. Both of them have things in them that are really not quite anything that we would normally have in our kitchen as part of our normal food preparation. So when we read through both ingredient lists, they're not natural. They're definitely manufactured meats. With that being said, are they easier on the environment? Yes. Are they still including, a plant-based protein in the soy or the pea protein? Yes. Are they a way for people to cut back on animal fats in their diet or just animal products in general? All of these would be a yes. But when we look at, are they better? That's a hard question to say yes to. And I think in my mind, I would say they're different. I don't necessarily think that they're better. I think that they're fascinating to me, though, I would say. So with that being said, okay, here's what our ingredients are. It's some things in there in the Beyond Burger that's just a little weird, but not really uncomfortable. And then there's stuff in the Impossible Burger that wow, that's like some intense food chemistry and food science going into this burger that makes us feel like we're doing kind of a natural organic-y thing, that we're having our plant-forward meal, but it's really one of the least natural things that might be on our plate. So that's kind of a comparison of ingredients. I'll have the links to all of these as well, and I'll have the link to an article. The article may not be live by the time I'm doing this podcast, but within a couple of weeks of this podcast, I'll go ahead and post a link to an article that'll have even more detail on this with the links and stuff like that too. So when we look at nutritional claims for each of these, and a lot of people are like, well, but are they really vegan? Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger are, yes, both are vegan. Impossible Burger does note that they did or do use animal testing to evaluate that soy leg hemoglobin we were talking about. Beyond Burger, certified vegan. They are both gluten-free. And then, of course, if someone needs something soy-free, that would be your Beyond Burger, because the Impossible Burger does have soy in it. So those are, and they're both kosher. So the nutritional claims, if you're looking for something vegan, they are both technically vegan. And although animal testing were used in creating that Impossible Burger, and they are both gluten-free. The sodium I mentioned, they're not low sodium, they're not low fat, they're not low calorie. But when it comes to taste and, well, how did our taste test turn out? The fats that are in there, I think, are key for making them so marketable and so popular with people. So when it comes to the results of our taste test, what did all this look like? So it was our burger face-off, our burger wars here of the Impossible versus Beyond versus all beef burger, held at Ochsner Fitness Center here in New Orleans. So a few things. The Impossible Burger is not available in patty form, at least not yet. So, and I mentioned also is not in stores. So I had to get the Impossible Burger from a food supplier or distributor that sells to restaurants. And so we were able to get a 5-pound log of it, as they call. And so molded it into burgers, 4-ounce burger patties, so that they were the same size as the Beyond Burger. So when you see Beyond Burger in stores, you will see it in patty form, available already shaped as hamburger patties. So we use that Beyond Burger. They're already shaped as a 4-ounce size. So we shaped the Impossible Burger to be the same size. And same with the all beef burger. Again, using the 85% lean beef, organic. And again, Walmart to Whole Foods, every place in between has it. And so shaped that. So they all were about the same size, the same thickness. And I have to give a shout out to our Eat Fit intern ambassadors. We had Rebecca Hinojosa, Jacqueline Futch, and Natalie Versace. And the three of them were incredible. 2 of them don't eat meat, and they got it together. They were grilling those burgers, flipping them, seasoning them. So it was great. So we did just the burger with some salt and pepper grilled, and then we had it just on a whole grain bun. So we didn't do condiments. We didn't want to cloudy it up with any of that stuff. So we had equal size burger patties grilled, and we kept them all grilled to a medium rare to medium, so that they weren't overcooked. So they all were cooked to about a medium rare. And then patted them up, plated them up on the buns and cut them into 4s. And we had 1 platter of them that was labeled A, one that was labeled B, one that was labeled C. So our taste testers from our Oshner Fitness Center family, who were so great, they really took it so seriously. They got a sheet that had kind of their assessment sheet. And so it was basically, okay, give us your feedback. What do you think about burger A, B, C? And then rank them all as far as your first choice, second choice, third choice on appearance, smell, flavor, texture, and then overall. And then we tried to have them guess like which is which. So of the 15 taste testers we had, 7 of them ranked the Impossible Burger as their number one choice. 6 of them ranked the all beef burger as the number one choice. And only 2 of them chose the Beyond Burger. Second place was kind of the reverse. 6 of them chose Impossible. 7 of them chose beef. And again, only 2 did the Beyond Burger. So basically, of our 15 testers, 13 of them had the Impossible Burger in their top 1 or 2. And 7 of them, it had the most votes for number one taste. The Beyond Burger had 11 people of our 15 put it as their number 3 choice. So here's the thing on the Beyond Burger. I think if you only had that in front of you, you would really think maybe it tasted more like beef. But when you put it next to the other 2, it was definitely a strong third place for many people. So the feedback was really interesting, and just watching them all was really interesting. So I looked over at one point, and one of our managers has his hands over his eyes, and someone's like feeding him the burgers because he wanted to not even see what they look like. He didn't want to see the color. He just wanted to taste it and see what he thought. And I bring that up because, one, it was funny, but also, and it was great. I was excited that they were really wanting to give like valid, accurate feedback. Probably at least 5 people said if I had my eyes closed, I would go with the Impossible Burger. And the reason they say that is the texture of the all beef burger, especially because they were all cooked to a medium rare. The texture of the all beef kept some of that pink in there. So I think visually it looked a little bit more appealing. But from a taste, a texture, the flavor, the juiciness, they were going for the Impossible Burger. So that was interesting feedback for me. And here is, I had one of our handheld recorders there. So here's a little bit of the feedback straight from them.
I find it really hard to believe how hard it really was to pick the real burger out. I still don't know which one is the real burger.
All right, the Impossible Burger was by far my favorite for taste. It was actually kind of juicy. I thought that the Beyond Burger was pretty much a very weird consistency and texture and taste. It had a smoky taste towards the end, and an all beef burger was pretty good, but Impossible Burger is my A choice.
My overall was the Impossible Burger. I was really convinced that it was the all beef burger. I liked it. It had a better mouthfeel than the other 2, and I was again convinced it was the all beef.
I'm more of a all beef, well cooked, no pink kind of girl. So that was my favorite, and the Impossible comes next. Great job. Hell. This is my favorite, but I am an all beef kind of girl. I just don't like the pink. So if I had to do Impossible and Beyond, no, I do. Because it's pink. It scares me. I like it well, but it's my favorite. But
in Candace's defense, we had her beef burger cooked rare, which is what threw her off. But the Impossible was ranked your number 1.
It did, opposed to the Beyond. So I'm behind my limits on this one. Next.
Without a bun, Impossible Burger is better. But with the bun, I like the all beef.
All beef is better with the bun.
Yes.
Impossible is better without the bun.
You got it.
Said with a mouthful of burger.
And from the true chef in the room.
Well, I found that the color of all 3 was quite impressive. Each one looked like it was a proper textured burger. I would say from a texture and taste standpoint, though, the Impossible Burger and all beef burger were pretty much indistinguishable. Once you take away the bun and condiment option, I would say the only difference is the potentially way it was cooked that would make, and seasoning that would make you decide beef versus regular. To the Beyond Burger's point, though, you can tell tell if you understand what Pete's flavor are. You know that is a veggie burger, but with some fresh condiments, non-processed, that would be quite a delicious sandwich and would satisfy anyone's craving for a burger type patty.
So I tried the Impossible Burger first, and from my initial reaction was that obviously this is the real burger. Which is insane, because then I went on and tried the actual beef burger, and I was like, hold up, this is the real burger. So the Impossible Burger, I don't know really how, but it won my overall in my first choice in appearance, smell, flavor, texture, and juiciness.
So I'm a vegetarian, and I liked the flavor of the Beyond Burger better than the Impossible Burger, but the Impossible Burger definitely tasted closest to meat. So I think it depends on flavor a lot.
I think it freaks people out who are vegans.
Yeah. I think the Impossible Burger, because it is so close to the meat flavor. I was saying that it's been 11 years since I've eaten meat, and that was the closest thing I've had to a burger in so long. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. The Beyond Burger didn't taste like that. You could definitely tell that it didn't have the meat flavor, but personally, I liked the flavor of that better.
Impossible Burger was my favorite. If I had to, if I ate them with my eyes closed, I would definitely pick Impossible Burger. It wasn't dry like the beef, but the beef wasn't even overcooked. It was just dry compared to the Impossible Burger. But it's kind of weird because I feel like I'm in a science fiction movie. Just we're growing the beef in a laboratory, even though it's not beef, it's plant-based. But I feel like I'm watching some movie from a kid, my childhood, where you're just on the moon, and instead of having cows, they just kind of like spit out this meat product to you, and it's supposed to do the trick. But it was pretty convincing.
So overall, the results from our 15-person taste panel at Oxnard Fitness Center, as you hear, the Impossible Burger was truly the surprise hit. I really felt like we were in one of those Burger King commercials that I had been doubting. It felt like that. And then when Candace, she truly thought, I had announced, so they did A, B, C, and they didn't know what they were, and they ranked them. And then I'll let them know, okay, A was Impossible Burger, B was the all beef, and C was the Beyond. And so then they could see which ones they had liked best. Candace misunderstood. She didn't hear me. So when we were getting her quote, if y'all heard her, she's like, oh, I am all beef. That's my favorite. That's just what I like. So of course I went with the all beef burger. Well, when I looked down at her sheet, I'm like, Candace, you chose A. That was Impossible Burger. She had no idea. And that was, that's why I say it truly was as if we were in a Burger King commercial. So the feedback is on these was that, the texture, the mouthfeel, it even has a little bit of an oiliness like real beef would have in the Impossible Burger. It has a little bit of that smokiness. It's very moist. It's very juicy. So all the things that you would want in a burger, I think they really found it in that Impossible Burger. Now, on the Beyond Burger, a lot of people thought, well, this must be the one with pea protein, or it must have something, because they were picking up on a flavor, but it was the pea protein gave it maybe a little bit of a legume effect to it, a little bit of a beaniness. And it wasn't quite as juicy. It was a little bit drier. It was still soft. It wasn't tough, but it just wasn't really moist or juicy. And the flavor just wasn't really as good. It wasn't as strong of a flavor. And you did kind of get a little bit of that aftertaste of the pea protein. Something that I thought was interesting too is several people asked so they all started out raw, or quote raw. And none of these are pre-cooked burgers. So unlike burgers that you would see in the freezer section at the store, these look like raw meat and you were putting them on the grill. But that Beyond Burger came out a little bit just kind of drier. And several people said, was this frozen? Was this pre-cooked? And they just noticed, they thought it just didn't look like the other two. It didn't look as good as the real beef or the Impossible Burger. For me, the feedback definitely drove home that Impossible Burger has nailed it in terms of mimicking all of the attributes of a burger that people are seeking out. So people who are true burger fans, even like Candace, who was like, I only love real beef. I don't like any of these veggie alternatives. Not knowing it, she was selecting that one. And that's what we saw over and over and over. So I think the takeaway on this is, Impossible Burger, you've done a fantastic job. The Beyond Burger, which is what we still currently have in most of our stores, it is still a decent product. I just think when you put them side by side, for most people, it is no comparison. Now, we did have 2 people who ranked the Beyond Burger as their favorite. They also do things like traditional veggie burgers. And so when you compare a Beyond Burger to what you might have been having for Boca or Morningstar Farms or any of those, Amy's, it's better. It's going to be a heck of a lot more like a real burger than what these frozen, pre-cooked veggie burgers have been in the past. But again, when we compare it to the all beef or the Impossible, there really was no comparison. So again, that question of are they healthier? It's really hard to say a definitive yes, because are they more natural? We can give that a definitive no. They're absolutely not more natural. But when we look at are they healthier? Yeah, there's aspects of it that are. The fact that it's plant-based fats, the fact that we are, limiting that, better for the environment, all of these things. And so when you're looking at labels, whether it's Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger, or any other kind of veggie burger, a couple of key takeaways of what to look for on the label. Read the ingredients and see, is there anything in there that, stands out to you as kind of a really strange ingredient. That soy leg hemoglobin is by far the strangest that I've seen. But when you're comparing the labels, compare the protein. There's some veggie burgers on shelves, like Dr. Prager's is one, and Amy's. And some of these burgers have like 4 grams of protein. If it's a meat replacer, that's not good. 4 ounces of meat typically is going to have about 20. These 4-ounce burgers gave us about 20 grams of protein. That's what we want to look for. So we want to look for getting enough protein. I would say look for one that has at least 15 to 20, 21 grams of protein. Keep your carbs low. Again, carbs are coming in all these other places. They're coming in from the bun. They're going to come in from wherever. So we don't need it from that patty as well. The exception would be if they have high fiber carbs added in there. And then watching the salt, almost every single veggie burger, these included that we talked about today, are going to be higher in salt. And then if it matters to you, look and see what the source is of protein. Some of them are soy-based. Some of them are pea protein, these 2 that we talked about today. Some are wheat protein. You'll see wheat gluten as one of the key ingredients. So it may matter to you of what that protein source is. And really, I would say, especially when it matters, is if you have food sensitivities or intolerances to any of those. And then also, if you're looking for something that is truly vegan, read the ingredient list closely, because a lot of them, like we said, do have egg whites. Some might have cheese or some other animal products. So if you want something that's specifically vegan and it tells you on the front of the label it's vegan, it is. But if you're not sure and it doesn't say vegan, it probably isn't. And take a close look at those ingredients on there. So that's kind of the rundown on our hot burgers, our Impossible versus the Beyond. And so if you're like, okay, where can I find these? The Beyond Meat is in grocery stores, and I've seen it at places like Costco, Publix, Target, Whole Foods, Walmart, all have it. If you're in like the Texas area, H-E-B has it. So grocery stores more and more are starting to carry the Beyond Meat. Restaurants have it. A lot of the restaurants are chain restaurants. So a lot of these I'm not familiar with, but TGI Fridays is one. And I might not be familiar with them because they might not be in our area, but also some of them are just a little bit, like I'll just say some of these names and you may have heard of them, but like Chronic Tacos, Black Bear Diner, Tilted Kilt. I'm not familiar with any of these, but TGI Fridays, Subway has it, Carl's Jr. Interestingly, places like Courtyard Marriott has it. So a few different places, Pita Pit on the border, offer Beyond Meat, and then Impossible Burger. The only stores so far that I've seen online, but we don't have these stores in our area here in the South, is Fairway Market, Wegmans, and a place called Gelson's. Just to pass that along, but we don't have those here, but they may be in your area. And then restaurants, Burger King, of course, Hard Rock Cafe, Applebee's, and other chain restaurants have them. But again, some of these aren't as big a names as those, but we're starting to see it more and more. I was out of town just this past weekend, and it was a little hole-in-the-wall place, a divey little place, and they had burgers with all types of different things. And they had a add-on sticker. You could tell it wasn't part of the normal menu board. It was like stuck onto it that said also offering Impossible Burgers. So they obviously had just started adding that before they've even updated their menus. So we're going to be seeing these more and more in stores on restaurant menus. And so try it for yourself. See what you think. Have your own taste test. If you get your hands on that Impossible Burger and you can get yourself a Beyond Burger, it's a fun thing to do with your family, friends. We had a blast doing it. So that's the rundown on nutrition, ingredients, ingredient claims, where to find them, and our taste test results from our burger face-off. And I will have links to some of the things that I mentioned on the show notes of this episode. And like I said, when the article I'm writing about it goes live, also doing a TV segment on it, I'll put the links to both of those. And let me know what you think. If you try them, I want to hear. I am Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.